The airport was a blur of noise and motion when I saw her. An older woman in a cream coat, signing frantically to no one who cared to look. Everyone rushed past like she didn't exist. I was already late for my flight, but something made me stop, set my bag down, and raise my hands. The moment our eyes met, I realized this wasn't about missing a plane. It was about not missing her. I was running on coffee and fumes, weaving through Terminal C with a carry-on biting into my shoulder, counting down minutes I didn't have. 3 days of "we'll be in touch" meetings had gone nowhere, and all I wanted was to make it home for mac and cheese night with my little girl. I'd promised Maddie with a pinky swear. She takes those seriously. So do I. The place was pure noise, rolling suitcases, last call announcements, 1,000 shoes scraping tile. Everyone kept their eyes down and their pace up. I was doing the same until I saw her. An older woman sat a few rows off the walkway in a cream coat that probably had a story. Silver hair, neat as a pin. Her face wasn't neat at all. Confused, tight, trying not to panic. She lifted her hands and signed, careful and clear, to no one in particular. People flowed around her like she was a statue in the middle of a river. I told myself to keep moving. My gate was on the far side of the terminal. 11 minutes until boarding. If I stopped, I might blow the promise. I took 3 more steps. Then I stopped anyway. I set my bag down where she could see me coming and raised my hands so she wouldn't spook. "Hello. Do you need help?" "I can help. My signing isn't pretty, but it's solid. Years of practice will do that." Her whole face changed at once. Shoulders dropped. Eyes filled. Breath came back. Her hands moved quick and shaky. "Thank you." I couldn't understand the announcement. "They changed my gate. My daughter isn't answering. I don't know where to go." "It's okay," I signed back. "One thing at a time. I'm Evan." She nodded, steadying herself. "Lillian. Lillian Hart. Boston flight." I pulled up the board on my phone. Her flight number popped up with a big yellow arrow. "Move to another concourse." "Already boarding." "Of course. They bumped you to B-22." I signed. "They started early. We can make it if we move now." I offered my elbow. She took it like it cost her pride to accept help, and also like she didn't have much pride left to spend. We started down the river. I kept one hand free so I could sign as we walked. "How long were you waiting?" "Half an hour," she answered. I tried to ask, but everyone looked through me. I felt invisible. That word hit harder than it should have. I've seen that look on my kid more times than I care to admit. Maddie trying to get a clerk's attention while someone talks over her like she's not standing right there. You get used to swallowing anger in public when you raise a deaf child. You don't get used to liking it. "You're not invisible," I signed. "You're here. We see you." It wasn't poetry. It was the truth a person needs when the bottom starts to slide. On the moving walkway, her hands shook less. Curiosity slipped in where panic had been. "How do you know sign?" "My daughter," I signed. "Maddie's 6. Born deaf. Best teacher I ever had." Understanding showed up in her eyes, the kind that doesn't need sound. "Then you know," she signed. People think silence means nothing. They don't know it's just a different way to be full. "Yeah," I signed. "I know." We stepped off and cut left toward B-22 came into view, a line already thinning. I jogged the last few steps with her, checked her boarding pass, and flagged the agent. Final call. We were just under the wire. Lillian squeezed my hands with both of hers. "Thank you for stopping," she signed. Most people didn't. "You're welcome," I signed back. "Safe flight." She dug in her purse and pressed a card into my palm. I didn't look at it yet. She signed one more thank you that said more than the words themselves and disappeared down the jetway. The speaker crackled with my own final boarding call from the other side of the building. I stood there for a beat, the card warm in my hand, then took off running. I slid into my seat with the kind of breath you can taste, buckled in, and finally looked down. Lillian Hart, the card read. Underneath, mother of Samantha Hart, CEO, Hart and Rowan Architecture. I let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. Figures. You stop to help a stranger and find out she's not a stranger to your line of work at all. But that wasn't what stuck with me as the plane pushed back. What stuck was the way her eyes changed when someone finally answered her in her language. What stuck was how close I'd come to walking past, and how easy it was not to. When I finally caught my breath, I realized the card in my hand felt heavier than paper should. Lillian Hart, mother of Samantha Hart, CEO, Hart and Rowan Architecture. I stared at it, half amused, half dazed. Of course, the universe had a twisted sense of humor. The one stranger I chose to help just happened to be connected to one of the biggest names in my field. But as the plane took off, that detail faded behind the image of her eyes. The way they went from terrified to alive the moment I signed hello. I couldn't shake it. I kept seeing her face, kept hearing her hands. When I got home, Maddie ran at me like a cannonball, her hands moving so fast I almost couldn't keep up. You made it. You promised, and you made it. I knelt, signing back, always will. Her laughter was the kind that filled a room without making a sound. We ate mac and cheese while she told me about her art project and her friend Emma's new puppy. I told her about a lady I met who couldn't find her gate because nobody would stop long enough to help. Maddie went still for a second, spoon halfway to her mouth. Like me sometimes, she signed quietly. People pretend not to see. I reached across the table and touched her hand. Yeah, I signed back. But not everyone pretends. Some people stop. Some people see. She smiled, small but sure, and went back to her noodles. Later that night, I sat at my desk staring at the business card again. I wasn't planning to call. I didn't do it for a reward. But there was something about that woman, something about the way she'd looked when she realized she wasn't alone. I thought of Maddie again, of every time she'd been ignored. Maybe it wasn't about reward. Maybe it was about reminding people like Lillian that they still mattered. 3 days later, my phone rang with a Boston area code. Mr. Evans? The voice on the other end was warm, professional, a little unsure. This is Samantha Hart. My mother told me what you did for her at the Seattle airport. She made it home okay? I asked, sitting up straighter than necessary. She did. Thanks to you. She told me everything. How everyone ignored her until you signed to her. How you told her silence isn't emptiness. I've spent my whole life watching people look through her, and I've built my firm to change that. We're launching a project, a community center focused on accessibility and inclusion, particularly for the deaf and hard of hearing. I think you might be exactly who we need. For a second, I just sat there staring at the mess of bills on my desk, at Maddie's crayon drawings taped to the wall. When would you like to talk? I finally asked. Soon, she said. Very soon. I hung up, leaned back, and laughed quietly to myself. All that because I stopped for 5 minutes. Because I said hello. Because I saw someone. 2 weeks later, I stepped off a red-eye into a cold Boston morning that smelled like jet fuel and rain. I hadn't been east in years, not since before the divorce. The cab ride from the airport gave me too much time to think about Maddie's drawing of a stick-figure dad under the words, "Don't forget to come back," taped to my suitcase, about how small my world had gotten since my ex walked out, and about how strange it was that a single moment in an airport had somehow landed me here. The office of Hart and Rowan sat on the waterfront, all glass and light, the kind of place that made you fix your posture as soon as you walked in. The receptionist greeted me with a professional smile. Mr. Evans, Ms. Hart is expecting you. When she appeared, I understood why people talked about Samantha Hart like she was her own brand of gravity. Early 30s, sharp in a navy suit, but her eyes softened when she spoke. She extended her hand and, before saying a word, signed fluently, "Welcome. I'm Sam. Thank you for coming." That single gesture, the confidence of someone who'd lived between 2 languages, disarmed me completely. I signed back, "Thank you for inviting me." Her grin was quick and genuine. "Let's get coffee. You're about to see what we've been building." We sat in a conference room overlooking the harbor. On the table were blueprints of a sleek community center, all accessibility specs perfectly checked off, but something about it felt sterile, designed for compliance, not belonging. Sam noticed the look on my face. "Exactly," she said, switching between voice and sign. "It's good, but it doesn't feel alive. My team's been missing something, perspective. My mom told me about your daughter. You see space differently." I hesitated. "I just see what she needs," I said quietly. "Things like sight lines for signing, lighting that makes faces clear, softer angles so conversations don't get boxed in." Her eyes lit up. "Yes, exactly that. Architecture that begins with deaf experience, not one that adds it later." She leaned forward, gesturing to the blueprints. "Show me." For the next hour, we forgot about time. I sketched circular seating layouts, lighting gradients, texture cues for direction, little things that made communication easier. She added notes in the margins, bouncing ideas, laughing at herself when she signed too fast for me to follow. Somewhere in the middle of it, the meeting stopped feeling like work and started feeling like conversation. When we finally leaned back, The harbor had turned gold with late afternoon light. Sam looked at the sketches, then at me. You know, she said, I grew up translating the world for my mom. I built this company to design spaces where she wouldn't have to fight to exist. But this, she tapped the new drawings, this is the first time it feels right. Her words stuck in my chest longer than they should have. Before I left, she walked me to the elevator. This was supposed to be a consultation, she said, half smiling. But I think it's the start of a partnership. If you're interested. I met her gaze. I'm very interested, I said. As the elevator doors closed, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the kind that comes from luck or timing, but the kind that starts with a simple decision to stop walking and truly see someone. The next few weeks blurred into flight itineraries, sketch revisions, and late-night calls with Boston. Every conversation with Sam felt like a blueprint for something larger, not just a building, but a way of seeing the world differently. By the time I flew back for the second meeting, she'd already sent me preliminary adjustments her team had made from our first talk. They were good, cleaner, smarter, more fluid, but still missing that heartbeat we talked about. When I walked into her office this time, she had her hair pulled back and sleeves rolled up, leaning over a layout spread across the table. You're early, she said, smiling, before switching to sign. Good. I hate wasting time. Same here, I signed back, and she laughed softly, the kind of laugh that makes a room warmer. We dove right in. She spread the updated drawings and motioned for me to take a look. The central hall was still rectangular, a traditional shape. I pointed at it. That's where we keep losing people. Straight lines make sense for hearing spaces. Deaf communication needs circles. She frowned thoughtfully. Explain. When people sign, they need eye contact. Rows kill that. Circles create visibility. It's not just aesthetic, it's cultural. I flipped a page and began sketching over it. Open circular seating, adjustable lighting angles, contrast-painted walls. If you can't see someone's hands, you can't understand them. She leaned closer, elbows on the table. That's beautiful. You're designing for language. I nodded. It's what Maddie taught me. Sound doesn't make meaning, connection does. Something shifted in her expression then, softer, more personal. My mother used to say that, she murmured. That silence isn't empty. It's just full of a different kind of sound. We kept working until dusk. The harbor lights came on one by one outside her window, reflections flickering across the glass like slow lightning. Somewhere between revising the lighting grid and adjusting the community cafe layout, the conversation stopped being about architecture altogether. I told her about Maddie, how she was born profoundly deaf, how my ex-wife couldn't handle it, how I'd learned ASL from YouTube tutorials and late nights with coffee and guilt. I told her about the moment Maddie first signed "I love you all" on her own, and how I'd nearly cried right there on the kitchen floor. Sam listened without interrupting, her hands resting still on the paper. You know, she said finally, when I was a kid, I used to watch my mom order coffee. She'd write everything down, and baristas would just stare like she was asking for something impossible. That's why I built this firm. I wanted her to live in a world that didn't make her beg to belong. We sat in quiet for a long time after that. Not uncomfortable silence, but the kind that says everything words can't. Before I left, she walked me to the door again. You know, she said, switching to sign, I think this project found the right architect. And I think it found the right reason, I replied. She smiled. Not her business smile, not her practice CEO smile, but something honest, unguarded. Let's build something that sees people, she said softly. As I stepped into the hallway, I realized that's exactly what we were already doing. From that point on, the project became our shared heartbeat. I'd fly to Boston every other week, and between trips, we'd send sketches back and forth, adding notes, teasing each other about who stole whose idea first. Somewhere in those long workdays and late-night calls, the line between professional respect and personal connection started to blur, not in the rushed way of office flirtations, but in the quiet way two people begin to see themselves reflected in each other's drive. Sam was relentless, smart, detail-obsessed, impossible to intimidate. But she had this calm underneath it all, the kind that comes from growing up in two worlds and learning how to translate both. When she talked about her mother, there was always this mix of pride and ache, like she'd spent her whole life building bridges for people to cross without ever resting long enough to cross one herself. During one of our late design sessions, she looked up from her laptop and asked, Does your daughter ever help you design? I smiled. You'd be surprised. She's got a better eye than half the people I've worked with. Once told me my lobby design looked like a dentist's office, and she was right. Sam laughed, shaking her head. You should have her send me something. Maybe she'll save this project too. A week later, a package arrived at her office from Maddie. Inside was a coloring book I'd helped her make, filled with simple outlines of the community center for her to color. Along with it came a note in crayon. Help Ms. Sam build the best playground ever. 2 days after that, Sam sent Maddie a message through me. A short video of her signing. Thank you, Architect Maddie. I can't wait to see your ideas. That night, Maddie spent 2 hours drawing. Slides, swings, a merry-go-round. Even a quiet corner shaped like a spiral for kids who needed a break. She'd drawn kids of all kinds, some signing, some talking, some just playing, all in one space. I scanned her drawings and emailed them to Sam. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a video call. Sam's hair was messy, her desk covered in papers. Your kid's a genius, she said before I could even say hello. Look at this. She designed a circular slide with window panels. It keeps the play connected visually. It's beautiful. We're using it. I laughed. She's going to want royalties. Sam grinned. She'll get credit. And probably a plaque. When I told Maddie the next morning, she nearly fell off her chair. They're building it? Really? She signed. They're building it. I signed back, unable to hide my smile. Something inside me cracked open then. Pride, gratitude, disbelief. For years, it had just been the two of us, fighting small battles in grocery stores, at schools, in a world that talked over her. And now her ideas, her voice, her hands, were part of something that would stand in the real world. That night, as I closed my laptop after another long call with Sam, I realized what had changed. The work wasn't just work anymore. It wasn't about drawings or budgets or deadlines. It was about belonging, for my daughter, for Sam's mother, for everyone who'd ever been made to feel invisible. And for the first time in years, I wasn't building alone. The invitation came on a Thursday night, dinner at my place. Nothing formal. My mother insists on cooking. I read it twice before responding. Sam wasn't the type to insist on cooking anything, but I had a feeling her mother was. When I arrived at the brownstone in Back Bay, I could smell the food from the sidewalk, something buttery and warm, the kind of smell that reminds you of home even if you never lived there. Sam opened the door barefoot, sleeves rolled up, hair loose for once. You made it, she said with that easy smile that always seemed to show up before the words did. The house was beautiful but lived in, not the sterile perfection of a design magazine, but a place where books leaned on each other and soft light touched everything. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Lillian Hart, elegant as ever, now in an apron and radiant grin. She signed, the kind man from the airport. Before I could even say hello, the lost traveler who found her gate, I signed back, and she laughed silently, her eyes shining. Dinner was loud in its own way, not with sound, but with motion, hands flying in conversation, the rhythm of shared laughter, the soft clinking of plates between sentences you could see instead of hear. Watching them together, mother and daughter, was like watching a duet they'd been practicing their whole lives. Sam anticipated every need without hovering. Lillian teased her in signs too quick for me to follow. They moved in sync like language itself was their heartbeat. For a long time, I just watched, feeling the kind of peace I hadn't felt since before my marriage fell apart. After dessert, Lillian kissed her daughter's cheek and signed that she was off to bed. When she left, the house grew quieter but not empty. Sam poured 2 glasses of wine and led me out to the balcony that overlooked the street. The night air was cool, soft with the hum of city life below. My mother still talks about that day, she said. How you stopped when nobody else did. She said something I didn't really understand until I met you. She looked at me then, her voice low. She said, that man sees people. I swallowed hard. She's being generous. She's being right, Sam said. You saw her. You see your daughter. You see me. I set my glass down, meeting her eyes. You build a company that does the same thing, Sam. You see the world differently, and you make it better for people who can't always make it better for themselves. She smiled faintly, a little unsteady this time. You really think that? I don't say things I don't mean. We stood there for a long moment, the distance between us shrinking with every breath. Then, without planning it, I said what had been sitting in my chest since our first meeting. You know, I used to think architecture was about buildings. Lately, I think it's about people. About creating space where someone feels they belong. You do that. Every day. Her eyes softened. You do it too, Evan. You just don't know it yet. And then she leaned in. Not the kind of kiss that announces itself, but the kind that asks permission in the silence between heartbeats. It was warm, unsure, human, the kind that feels like discovery, not victory. When we finally pulled apart, she smiled and whispered, "We'll have to tell Maddie." I laughed under my breath. I think she already knows. That night, walking back to my hotel through the quiet Boston streets, I realized something simple and impossible to ignore. The woman whose mother I'd helped in a crowded airport had somehow helped me find something I didn't know I'd lost: the feeling of being truly seen. Spring break couldn't come fast enough. For weeks, Maddie had been counting down on a paper calendar she made herself, big red X's marking each day until Boston with Dad. She'd never flown before, and though she tried to act brave, I could see the nerves in the way her fingers fidgeted when she signed. "What if she doesn't like me?" she asked while we waited at the gate. "She already likes you," I signed back. "You've been designing together for months." "That's different," she insisted. "That's through a screen. What if I'm weird in person?" I smiled. "You're not weird. You're extraordinary." She rolled her eyes with that 6-year-old seriousness that always makes me grin. Every parent says that. When we landed, Sam was waiting near the terminal, waving, and to Maddie's surprise, she signed before speaking. "Hi, Maddie. I'm so happy to finally meet you. Your playground is coming to life. Want to see it?" Maddie's expression went from cautious to glowing. She looked at me for confirmation, and when I nodded, she took Sam's hand like they'd known each other for years. At the construction site, a small hard hat waited with Architect Maddie printed in bright letters. Sam had thought of everything. The three of us walked through the fenced area as workers assembled the playground. Maddie's circular slide with window panels already standing tall, catching the afternoon light like colored glass. Every few steps, Maddie would tug my sleeve and sign, "That's mine." They built my idea. Her joy filled the air like music you could see. Sam crouched beside her, showing her how the plans matched what was being built, tracing lines with her finger as Maddie nodded, absorbing every detail. Later, we had dinner at Sam's brownstone. Lillian joined, greeting Maddie like family, signing slowly and clearly so the little hands across the table could keep up. They hit it off immediately, Lillian's gentle humor meeting Maddie's eager energy halfway. Watching them together felt like watching generations of strength and grace pass between them without a sound. After dessert, as coats were being fetched and goodbyes signed, Maddie tugged on Sam's sleeve. Sam bent down, and Maddie asked with absolute seriousness, "Are you my dad's special friend?" I froze mid-step. Sam didn't miss a beat. She smiled and signed, "I'd like to be, if that's okay with you." Maddie considered this like a tiny judge delivering a verdict, then nodded. "Okay, but can you be my special friend too?" Sam's face softened. "I would love that." Satisfied, Maddie added, "Good, because my dad smiles more when he talks about you. He needs to smile more." Lillian chuckled soundlessly, her eyes twinkling. I could only shake my head and laugh. Sam reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her expression saying everything words couldn't. On the flight home, Maddie fell asleep with her head on my arm, still wearing her miniature hard hat. Outside the window, the clouds glowed in soft orange light, and I realized I wasn't just heading home. I was carrying a new kind of peace with me. For the first time in a long time, life felt not like something to survive, but something to build. 6 months later, I stood on a stage inside the finished community center, the same one that had lived on blueprints and napkin sketches for nearly a year. Now it was real, glass and color and light, every angle intentional, every corner alive with movement. The walls glowed with soft contrast tones so hands were always visible, and the main hall curved perfectly, forming a wide circle where no one could be hidden from sight. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement. The seats were full, half the audience signing, half listening, everyone belonging in the same space for once. Lillian sat proudly in the front row beside Sam, who stood next to me at the podium. Maddie was between them, kicking her legs in her chair, wearing a blue dress and that same Architect Maddie hard hat she refused to part with. I took a slow breath and began, signing and speaking together. 6 months ago, I was running through an airport, late and exhausted. when I saw someone everyone else ignored. I almost kept walking. I had a flight to catch, a promise to keep. But something made me stop. The room grew still. Even those who didn't know sign language could feel the rhythm of it, the sincerity behind each motion. That choice, to stop, to see someone, changed everything. It led me here, to this building, to this project, to these people. I turned slightly towards Sam and Lillian, then to Maddie, who grinned up at me like she already knew what I was going to say. My daughter taught me that silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning, love, and connection, if you're willing to listen with your eyes. There was a quiet wave of emotion across the crowd, the kind that doesn't make noise but fills the air anyway. Maddie signed from her seat. "Dad, you're getting mushy again." The audience burst out laughing, some signing her words to those who couldn't. Even Lillian wiped a tear while shaking her head in amusement. I smiled and continued. "We built this place on one simple belief, that everyone deserves to be seen. Not as an accommodation, not as a checkbox, but as the heart of the design itself. Because inclusion isn't generosity, it's justice. And when we build with that truth, we don't just make spaces. We make belonging." When I finished, Sam stepped forward and took my hand. "And none of this would exist without the man who stopped in that airport," she said, her voice catching slightly. "He reminded us all that the smallest gesture can become the foundation of something extraordinary." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Applause and signing blended together like one shared language. Lillian wiped her eyes openly now, beaming with pride. Maddie jumped up, clapping and signing. "That's my dad." And I couldn't help it. I laughed through the tears. When the ceremony ended, we walked through the building together. Children played on Maddie's playground, the circular slide shining under the skylight, laughter bouncing off the walls. Parents watched, some signing, some talking, all connected. It was the first time I'd ever seen sound and silence blend so seamlessly. Sam leaned close and whispered, "You did it." I shook my head. "We did it." She smiled. "Then let's keep doing it." And right then, surrounded by the voices and hands of people who'd spent their lives waiting to be seen, I realized we already were. When the last guests left and the lights dimmed, the building felt different, softer somehow, alive in its quiet. The echo of laughter and signing still lingered in the air, like the walls themselves had learned a new language. I walked through the hall slowly, Maddie holding one of my hands and Sam the other. Behind us, Lillian sat near the entrance, her eyes following us with the calm pride of someone who had waited her whole life to see this moment. We passed the main gathering room, the heart of the building, and Maddie pointed up at the circular skylight. The late sun poured through it, washing the floor in golden light. "It looks like a hug," she signed. I nodded. She was right. The room was hugging everyone who entered. Sam turned to me, her hand brushing mine. "You realize," she signed, "this all started because you stopped." I smiled. "Because I saw your mother," I said softly. "Because you saw her," she signed again, "and she saw you." We reached the kids' room, Maddie's room, according to the plaque Sam had installed without telling me. Inside were low tables, bright murals, shelves of crayons and sketch pads. Maddie gasped when she saw it. "My room." She signed with both hands flapping in excitement. Sam knelt beside her. "It's yours whenever you visit Boston. You earned it." Maddie threw her arms around her neck, and for a second, Sam froze, surprised, before hugging her back with a tenderness that made my throat tighten. Lillian appeared in the doorway then, watching quietly. She didn't sign anything, didn't need to. Her smile said enough. As we stood there, 3 generations, 3 lives tied together by a single act of kindness, I thought about that day in the airport, about how close I'd come to walking past, about how different everything would be if I had. I used to measure my life by deadlines and deliverables, by paychecks that never stretched far enough. Then, after Maddie was born, I started measuring in smaller victories, a perfect braid, a new sign learned, a bedtime story finished without either of us falling asleep mid-sentence. Now I measured time differently still, in moments of grace. The instant you decide to stop rushing, to see someone. The second your hands find the courage to say hello when the world looks away. As we locked up and stepped into the evening air, Sam slipped her arm through mine. Maddie walked ahead, spinning under the streetlights, her laughter silent but bright as a song. "You know," Sam said quietly, "my mother was right." The day you stopped was the day everything started. I looked at her, then at the little girl twirling in the glow ahead of us. Maybe that's how love works, I said. It starts when you stop running. She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. Then don't ever run again. I didn't plan to, because in the end, it wasn't just a story about an airport or a design or a company. It was about seeing someone when no one else did and realizing that kindness isn't a transaction. It's an inheritance. The building behind us glowed in the night like a beacon, every window alive with color and movement. And as I watched my daughter's hands dance in the light, I finally understood love has a language of its own. You just have to stop long enough to learn it.